Hello, my dear students. Very good morning to one and all. Once again, I welcome you all to this online English classes. Hope you people are attending the classes regularly and acquiring the knowledge through these online classes. In my previous videos, I have told you about these social, psychological and applied perspectives. In that we saw words, then utterances. Now I am going to finish another one topic, that is conversations. So let us see one by one. So first we will discuss about conversations. Conversation means that utterances usually occur with other utterances. That is, they are usually embedded in a conversational context. Interactive language use and conversation in particular complicates considerably our understanding of language. One way to appreciate conversational complexity is to examine the complete transcript of a conversation. A transcript that captures all of the false starts, incomplete sentences, repetitions, backtracking, non-content words or phrases. Oh, well, etc. These are all the examples. Real conversations look far different from the idealized conversations seen in novels and plays, and this reflects their collaborative and emergent nature. Now we will see conversational structure. Much of the early work on the structure of conversations was conducted by researchers working within a framework termed conversation analysis (CA). CA was developed in the year 1960s by the socialist Harvey Sachs and his colleagues Emmanuel Skegloff and Gail Jefferson. Conversation analysis has its roots in ethnomethodology, a branch of sociology developed by Harold Garfinkel in 1967 that takes as its central argument that the idea that the social order is continuously recreated by people as they use language to make sense of their behavior and that of others. Conversational analysis, that is CA, like ethnomethodology, focuses on these common linguistic practices. The general strategy is to examine actual, not contrived verbal interactions in great detail. Example, telephone conversations. These recordings are then transcribed, keeping as much detail. Example, overlap, talking, pauses, breathiness, word and syllable stress, etc. as possible. A fully standardized transcriptive system developed primarily by Gail Jefferson in 2004 exists for this purpose. The goal of the analyst is to identify regularities or patterns in the sequential organization of talk. This is an empirical inductive approach and no a priori concepts or theories are applied at the outset. In contrast to other approaches to language covered in this chapter, no reference is ever made to internal states and events. That is, example, conversational implicatures, positive face wants, etc. It is an approach that takes talk and only talk as object of study. Then we will see adjacency pairs. In this approach, the most fundamental unit is termed an adjective pair. Goffman 1976 used the term couplet for a similar unit. Then Clark 2004 referred to them as projective pairs. Adjacency pairs consist of two utterances spoken by two people with the utterances paired such that given the occurrence of the first pair pod, the second pair pod becomes conditionally relevant. Examples of adjacency pairs include question answer, apology, minimization, offer, acceptance, greeting, someone's answers, request, promise, and so on. These are all adjacency pairs. Then we will see turn taking and repair. Conversations are normally quite orderly. One speaker speaks at a time and speaker transitions occur with relatively little overlap. Moreover, this order lines occurs regardless of the number of speakers, the size of the turns, the topic of the conversation, and so on. In a seminal article, Sachs, Skegloff, and Jefferson in 1974 proposed a model to account for this turn-taking regularity. This model has two components. One is a turn construction component, another one is a turn allocation component. The first component refers to the syntactical and intonational features of a turn that result in its projectability after a conversational turn has begun. Interactants can quickly identify the type of turn that is underway and the point at which the turn will be completed. Then we will see perspective taking. To converse successfully requires perspective taking, and some theorists have argued that perspective taking is one of the most fundamental tasks in successful language use. Perspective taking is critical because linguistic meaning is not entirely fixed. Words can have multiple meanings, and these meanings are activated simultaneously, at least initially. Perspective taking is necessary but not sufficient for successful communication. Rather, mutual perspective taking of some sort is required. The concept of mutual perspective taking has been captured most clearly with the concept of common ground. For example, in general, X is in common ground when two interacts, each know X, and each knows that the other knows X. Mutual perspective taking then is the attempt to establish what is in common ground. One of the major findings with these talks is that the descriptions that people provide typically vary as a function of that the intended audience can be presumed to know a phenomenon referred to as audience design. For example, messages designed for another person tend to be longer and more literal than messages designed for oneself. Demonstrated that New Yorkers produce long description of New York City landmarks for non-New Yorkers of whom they can assume less New York knowledge than they do for New Yorkers. Further, messages designed for friends tend to be shorter than messages designed for unknown others. With friends, much can be left unsaid because of the relatively large amount of shared knowledge. Interestingly, audience design occurs not just with humans but with robots as well. People make assumptions about what a robot knows and adjust their message based on this assessment. This will mean assessment. The assessment is perspective taking. A potential problem with these studies is that they do not demonstrate directly. The perspective taking is the phase factor influencing message formulation. That is, Fussell and Crosses in 1992, however, used a procedure in which participants' assumptions about what their addressee knew were explicitly measured, and these estimates were significantly related to the amount of descriptive information in a message. Hence, speakers' messages were based, in part, on their estimates of what their addressees knew. The primary motives for convergence are to establish closeness and affiliation with the other person, and to demonstrate mutual membership in a group. Speech divergence, in contrast, is viewed as a desire to emphasize one's identity with a reference group that is external to the current situation. Such a motive is most likely to be silent when communicating with out-group members, and especially when one's social identity has been threatened. Summary. At some point, most reviews of language and social psychology typically lament the lack of attention that social psychologists have paid to topic of language. This regret is duly noted here. Social psychologists have tended to ignore the role of language in social psychological processes. Still, there is reason for optimism. There have been important developments across a fairly wide swath of social psychology as well as related disciplines that focus on language and its role in psychological processes, as well as the social psychological underpinnings of language use. A brief summary of those developments follows. Language, prejudice, and discrimination. The important role played by language in prejudice and discrimination has long been noted, but it is only more recently that sustained empirical attention has been brought to bear on these topics. This research has shown in a variety of ways how the use of language serves as a tool for the creation and maintenance and dissemination of prejudice, how language as an abstract system can serve as a repository for the prejudices of its users. Both theoretical and empirical contributions to this literature are expected and warranted. Then you will see pragmatics and social psychology. Pragmatics may be the language discipline with the most to offer social psychology. The most obvious example of this is the application of conversational principles to understanding participants' responses in psychological experiments. The fundamental insight of this work that the social psychological products emerge in the context of the interactive language use could easily be applied outside the lab. At the same time, social psychology has much to offer the field of pragmatics, especially in terms of the development and testing of models that specify the role of social psychological variables in language use. In short, there is a pragmatic component to many social psychological processes and products, and social psychological processes underlie a wide variety of pragmatic phenomena. Then we will see language and culture. What is the relationship between language and culture, and what is the role of language and culture in conversation while making utterances and conversations? Research on the cultural underpinnings of psychological processes has increased exponentially in recent years, yet the possible role played by language in mediating this variability has not received a corresponding degree of attention. It is obviously difficult to disentangle the reciprocal relationship between language, culture, and social psychological processes. Still, understanding the cultural underpinnings of social psychological processes necessitates a consideration of the role played by language in those processes. Then we will see language, perception, and impression management. Verbal interactions are often the stage for our attempts at impression management as well as the site for our perceptions of others. Speakers' accents, the content of their words, the way those words are spoken, when, where, and why those words are spoken, and so on, are all pieces of the impression management formation puzzle. Hence, rather than being abstract, this embodied processes both impression management and person perception are grounded in verbal interactions, and there is much to be gained by examining the role of language used in these processes. Then, emerging communication technologies. Social interaction in general and language use in particular are changing in fundamental ways because of the development and adoption of new electronic communication technologies. Mediated communication represents both a challenge and opportunity for social psychologists because these changes raise questions regarding the generalizability of earlier findings. Example is management just as relevant in virtual interaction as it is in face-to-face interaction, as well as questions regarding new social psychological processes that may be engaged in virtual interactions. To study language is to study how people produce and comprehend meaning. Every topic covered in this chapter is in some way concerned with meaning, from communicative intentions and speech acts to the social meaning associated with accents or politeness levels, both intentionally and unintentionally conveyed, to the implicit causality of different verb forms. To study language, then, is to study the social construction of meaning, one of the earliest and most fundamental concerns of social psychology. Of social psychology. So, my dear friends, this is what the conversation. This is what the detailed explanation for the topic conversation. Hope you might have got the points. If you have any clarifications, means you can ask me directly in the comment sections without any hesitations. So, my dear students, with these few points, with these few slides, I would like to conclude my video lecture. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching and sparing your time. It's me. Thank you very much.